Cool. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the IPFS All Hands Call. This is the first All Hands Call we've had in quite some time due to the holidays. I hope it's not too loud where I am. I'm in a co-working space. A couple of notes before we start the call. Generally what we're going to do is go through the agenda, which you can find in the notes link, which is on IRC, also on the Sprint issue. And we're just going to go through very quickly and sort of cover them. If we have any free space after the call, we may be able to go into specific issues if people want to, or we could designate time later in the day for like more extensive video calls if we need it. Unlike in previous weeks, we're not going to be going with set times for various endeavors. So Go IPFS, JS IPFS, Apps and IPFS won't be having their own separate hours, but we're going to do things as needed. And then we have specific sprint calls, which we're going to have after this call for various endeavors that we're trying to do differently. We've sort of adopted a bit of a Scrum pattern. So we're probably going to talk more about that in this call. I just wanted to let you guys know beforehand. Finally, there's a note about the code of conduct. This call and everything involving the IPFS community follows the IPFS code of conduct. If you haven't checked it out, it's in IPFS/community on GitHub. And with that, David Diaz is taking notes. If you don't see your name at the top of the notes, please add it there. And let's start with a roll call. Generally, we start from the furthest east in the world, going to the furthest west. I don't see Kabuksu today, so it looks like probably Hod. Do you want to start us off?
Great. Hello, my name is Hod. I work on Orbit and JS IPFS. I'm based in Berlin.
Who's next? Victor?
I think it's me, actually. I'm in Hamburg. My name is Kix, and yeah, I work on the Go side of IPFS, for example, Orbit. Oh, there's Lars. He's further east.
Lars, your turn. Who are you? This is Lars. Lars is great. Lars lives in East Berlin. He works on infrastructure and packet switching. Cool. Victor?
Hey, me first.
Go ahead, sorry.
Why are you always forgetting me? I'm Friedel. I live in Germany, but in the south, in Freiburg, and I work on IPFS and lots of JavaScript things, especially JS IPFS.
So my name is Victor. I live in Barcelona. I work on JS IPFS related things and the infrastructure stuff. You're muted, David.
Don't double mute me. Sorry. So hi everyone, I'm based out of Lisbon and I'm currently in Lisbon.
Sweet, thank you, David. I'm Richard. I am currently in Argentina, which is further east in all of America. I didn't know that beforehand. And I work on documentation in JS IPFS and various other small things for internal tooling.
Richard, FYI, when you're not muted, the background noise sort of drowns out everyone else, like it's turning down the other people's mics. I'm Matt. I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm the program manager for Protocol Lab. So I deal with a lot of the overall organizational roadmap stuff and engagement with a lot of other organizations. And this quarter, I'm going to also be putting back on my project management hat for a couple of our sprints, and you'll be hearing more about that in a little bit.
Have a project management hat?
What was that, Lars? You're really quiet.
Do you have a project management hat?
Yeah, I'm wearing it right now. It's invisible and glittery.
Frank and Johnny, I think I know where you guys are, but I'm not sure where you are in relation to each other. So
yeah, I am way West Coast, so
you're last.
Yeah.
Johnny?
All right, so Johnny Crunch, Jonathan Holt, Transcendex is my company, and I'm building apps using IPFS. And I'm Frank. I'm in way western United States, and I'm working on primarily Kubernetes IPFS with Victor. That's his project, and other various networking-oriented things. Started on with IPFS about 2-3 weeks ago, and I've been doing networking-related stuff because that's my specialty.
And Goldani, where are you at?
I'm a student at USC in Los Angeles, so West Coast. So
What do you do?
I'm like a senior computer science student. I'm also an applied computer security minor.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone. So that was our roll call. Looking at the agenda, there's a call for additional agenda items. Matt, would you like to take over the lead of the call, seeing as how I apparently am very loud? Is that okay?
Sure, I can lead. I'm also I think I'm I've submitted most of the agenda items, so which is why I didn't pick up from Lars to be the facilitator, because I'm the moderator and the speaker.
I'll keep facilitating then. Matt, do you want to go with the Q1 roadmap? What's it about?
Yeah, so this is, the announcement is that we are switching, as Richard mentioned earlier, we're kind of switching up our structure for how we're planning our roadmap for the quarter, which then impacts a lot of things, including how these Monday calls are going to be structured. The key thing to unveil is that link right there, the waffle board for IPFS/roadmaps. That is the quarterly roadmap of the projects that Protocol Labs people are committing to spend time on. And the key thing here is this notion of a sprint, borrowed from Scrum, not surprising. But the key thing here is that for us on this roadmap, the sprints are always 2 weeks long on this roadmap. And a sprint, if someone is on a sprint, then the work of that sprint is the center of their attention for that whole 2 weeks. So that if of course, there might be little things that they're going to pay attention to during that time, but they're going to be primarily paying attention to the work of that sprint during those 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now, because a card can only exist in one place on a waffle board at a time, actually, I've never tested that. Richard, could you try putting week 3 and week 4 on one of those issues and see if it shows up in both places? So for right now, those sprints, they're in the week that starts the sprint. So right now we're at the beginning of week 3 of the year. So under week 3, you see that we're starting 2 sprints. One that's focused on data.gov that I'll talk about in a moment, and then one that's focused on the JS IPFS accessing Go IPFS content from the browser. And David is leading that one. Rich, I see you shaking your head, so it didn't work. Okay. Oh well. So yeah, that is the unveiling of the roadmap of what we will be focusing what the Protocol Labs people will be focusing their attention on over the coming quarter, and then people are welcome to add their own work onto this roadmap. We have added this notion of a sprintino, like a little sprint that involves maybe one person or 2 people working for maybe a couple days or a week. And so that's not quite a full-fledged sprint. It doesn't necessarily have a project manager coordinating it, but it's something that we wanted to acknowledge on the roadmap as taking up someone's time. So that is the new roadmap and the new sprint structure, sprints and sprintinos, which brings up this, I've noticed with all these new cards, that creates this confusion of, we have had this notion of the Monday sprint calls, and the tickets for those are marked with the label sprint. And so that is creating, I think it's going to create some confusion about what's a sprint versus what is just a weekly check-in call. Richard?
So I call it Sprint. It used to be called Sprint A, B, C, D, E. It's fine if we rename it to like week 1 sprint or week 2 and 3 sprint. That wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, well, we can follow. I just wanted to call it out at this point. It's like, that's going to be a little bit confusing until we figure out the right language for distinguishing between these weekly calls versus these things that we are calling sprints because they are modeled on the Scrum notion of a sprint. And then the other thing to call out with this new roadmap is we put our heads together about acknowledging that a number of the endeavors have sort of gone stale. So a number of things that people have been working on have sort of drifted out of getting full attention. And so rather than letting those just sort of sit kind of half acknowledged, we're being a little bit more formal about acknowledging what projects have gone stale, what can we do to keep them fresh. And there's a pull request there that has a list of the endeavors and their statuses, so which ones are stale, which ones are actively maintained, and there are a bunch of issues I've spun up for the captains of each of those endeavors to follow up and set the plan of what's going to happen to that endeavor over this next quarter. That's partially, as far as what's important for the community, that's partially so that community members can know if there's an endeavor that you care about that has been marked as being basically we don't have the bandwidth to handle supporting it right now, then that's a place where community members could step up and take captainship of that endeavor. So hopefully this gives more clarity of ways that people can get involved in helping this code stay healthy and fresh. That's the unveiling. Do people have questions or comments or things I missed that you want to add?
Maybe one comment about, am I loud enough?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe one comment about waffle boards for the sprints. So right now we've opened up all the issues regarding tasks of sprints in the respective repos of the endeavor. For example, the JS IPFS repo and the archives repo. And the waffle boards of these are where you can look at what's in progress and what's next and what the priorities are.
Yeah, so I think it's going to take us a couple weeks to get this really clear. But the main thing would be that, so this waffle board is currently showing sprint issues that are in the IPFS PM repository. And I have a hunch that what will work is to use those sprint issues as your sort of very minimal consistent reference point to know who's on the team, who's the PM or the primary contact for that sprint, and where do I find the waffle board for that sprint, and that it might be just, and what are the dates that sprint's happening. So we might put that info, we might start putting that basic info into these tickets, into these issues in IPFS PM. And then you can use those to find the waffle board for where we're tracking the actual active work per project. Is that, David, does that sort of align with what you were thinking in terms of how to track your sprints?
Sorry, I all captured that because I was going through all the notes and opening the waffle boards and trying to like find my way through all these tabs. Could you summarize it?
Yeah, the main thing, just the simple thing of these issues that are in IPFS PM that are marked with the sprint label, they're sort of like the reference point that lets you then, that you could then use to find the waffle board for all the work related to that sprint. So IPFS PM gives us this roadmap for the whole organization. But then those individual sprints won't have a ton of information. They just let you figure out like, oh, David's the lead on this project. Lars and Kuba are working on it with him, and it's happening on these weeks, and I can find the waffle board for all the relevant, like the actual tasks related to that sprint here, like in whichever repo.
Got it. So what we did, we expanded a little bit, and in addition to have this rendezvous point for like who is working on this project or on this sprint for these 2 weeks. We also list all the tasks that we enumerated during the prep session. So last week we went for 1 hour and a half, and we just like kind of like brainstormed a little bit and like tried to understand what are the things that we have to do that fulfill the needs for the goal of this sprint, and everything that was not a need for this sprint we put as like an extra, as a bonus, like a bonus mile. The other thing that we agreed that like we felt it was a very good thing to do is daily check-ins on the sprint issue. So people can tell on the sprint issue what they're going to be working on that day, and in the end of the day they can also tell the rest of the people working with them what did they manage to finish and if they got blocked in something. So that this way we have like a daily iteration cycle where everyone knows what everyone else is working on, and if there is something that is more urgent because we realize halfway, or if someone gets blocked, then we can like try to unblock that person as soon as possible. The other thing that we also scheduled was 2 checkpoint times. So we'll be checking in with each other as a group at both Thursdays, so this Thursday and next week's Thursday as well. And that is just like for us to sync all together and like basically describe what were the challenges so far, what is the state of the tasks that everyone was assigned for, and the reason why Thursday and not Friday is because it gives us like that extra day before the weekend for us to crunch some tasks and get like go happy to the weekend, and then come back next Monday and continue the work, which will also be very powerful for next week when we are in the end of the sprint, like to check in 1 day before the end of the sprint so that we can like just do that extra last mile with a huge a lot of energy so that everyone can like finish all the tasks that they propose to during the sprint. So yeah, like we basically like this was a discussion between the people that were preparing the browser accesses Go IPFS Sprint. We are trying. We are not sure if this is the best thing. It might be too much overhead. It might be too much in communication. It might be too little. We still don't know. This is the first sprint, so we'll definitely report back on how everyone feels. So far, has been going good, but it's just the first day, so I don't know.
And by contrast, I'm trying slightly different stuff with the sprint I'm leading, where tomorrow we're going to do more of, we wanted to do it today, but half the team's not available. So tomorrow we'll be doing a more traditional kind of sprint planning call, where we will all look at the list of, so I'm currently working on building up the list of stories and objectives and what are the things involved in that, and breaking that out as issues and issues that people could claim. And then what we'll do tomorrow is a longer call. They're usually less than an hour, but they're certainly more than 20 minutes, where we will read through all the stories. We'll look through all the stories and have conversations about how hard are they, who wants to work on what, why are we doing, like, why is that story written that way? All of that stuff, we'll have that as the sort of launch of the sprint. And then we haven't decided whether we're going to do actual synchronous daily stand-ups or do the same thing that you guys are doing of just adding the issues adding the comments onto an issue. We'll discuss that tomorrow too.
One thing, I share the link, I can share again for with you. Like I did the recording of the session that we did last Thursday in preparation for these 2 weeks. And they have basically a lot of like feedback from everyone and a lot of thoughts and like the reasons why we are doing asynchronous check-ins through an issue and not, like a call and so on. So that might be useful information while you are planning for the rest of them. Great,
I'm glad you recorded that. I heard like people told me piecemeal what was discussed, but I like only got little bits and pieces of it. So I'll be happy to watch the recording.
I'll send you the link.
So yeah, that's the shift in structure, something I wanted to call out for community members following this is the part of the point here of publishing this roadmap is that it allows is that the people from Protocol Labs have put our heads together to figure out what we are committing our time to working on, and making it clear what we're working on, what that's aiming at achieving, and to some extent why we're working on that, which then gives room for community members, one, to know what to expect from what we're working on, but also it gives you room to have a sense of where you can contribute, either by picking up something that's not getting attention or contributing to a sprint we're already committed to. And so this is where I'm hoping in the long term that will allow us to build more of a sense of the community coordinating by communicating about what they're focusing on and why, and that people can sort of build up a community roadmap that extends beyond just what Protocol Labs is focusing on. Whereas by contrast, last quarter, we were sort of like, we're going to work on everything. And it like didn't leave really clear paths for people to get involved. And so this is, that's part of this shift, is it gives a more entry points for people.
And it also turned out that we're going to work on everything didn't lead very far.
Yeah, I hope to write up a blog post about thrashing and what we learned from the last quarter, and we'll see if I have time to write it up.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else have any more questions about the last point? No. Sweet. Okay. The next person is Matt with uptick in discourse traffic.
Yeah. So starting late last week, there was sort of a jump in the amount of people participating on. Today, Matt is talking with Matt. I don't know what that means, but so there are more people in the discourse channel asking questions. So this is our opportunity to test discourse, see how it actually is working in terms of allowing us to let people ask questions and let us answer questions. It's very, very quickly brought up things where people are asking questions on discourse that are already answered in the FAQ. So it brings up that issue of how do we handle that connection of FAQ versus forums. But also, yeah, I mainly wanted to get it on everyone's radar because some people expressed misgivings about discourse because we had not properly tested it. We weren't really trying it. So here's an opportunity to really try it. There are numerous people asking genuinely interesting, good questions that we can try answering.
One thing to note there is that we had part of the plan of testing and moving to discourse was moving the FAQ to discourse. It might make sense to actually do that now that people are starting to use it and make it easier and more obvious, or at least start creating a post which is pinned or linked in the pin to the FAQ to make sure people read it before posting. There are a couple of ways you can make that in discourse happen.
Cool.
Is there a process for moving that forward besides just saying now's a good time to interface? Do you know when we would switch over, or whether I should move over all the FAQ stuff now?
For the short term, I would say at least just add a pinned note saying, make sure to check the FAQ. And then you might, because there's also just the figuring out of what's going to be a smooth way to move the FAQ over, because like the FAQ, you don't like looking at the stuff in the FAQ, a lot of them are lengthy discussions where multiple people have, it has functioned like a forum. So how you translate that into stuff, how you would move that onto discourse is a little bit unclear. But so for the short term, I would say at least just put that link up. And
sounds good. Thank you. Everyone check out discourse. David?
Is there a way to enable GitHub authentication in discourse so that people that are used to interact with us through GitHub, they don't have to create a new account?
Yes, I think so. Richard might know, but I know that it is possible if you're running your own copy of Discourse, but I think it might not be possible with we're in the trial version where we don't, where we're just ipfs.trydiscourse.com. Maybe Lars knows.
No, but I was just gonna suggest if the trial version is restricted in a set of features, then maybe we can just flip it to a paid version. Oh, someone's typing. Thank you.
Yeah, there were definitely, I mean, there were things like the trial version only works with HTTP, not HTTPS. And I think the trial version does not allow anonymous posting. So there were some like real concerns from some people saying like this doesn't work, but those concerns would be addressed if we switched. If we finish the trial and switch to just using it, we can address those concerns.
What I mean is our own trial of Discourse doesn't necessarily, well, it doesn't require that we're using the trial version of Discourse for that. We can conduct our own trial with the full version of it as well.
Yeah, good point.
Great, thank you. Sweet, moving on to the next point. Goldani, do you want to tell us who you are and what you're doing here and how we could maybe help you or how you could help us?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a senior at USC studying computer science and minoring in applied computer security. And for this class, I have the opportunity to work on an open-ended project, and I am really interested in this project, and I just kind of want to help contribute in some capacity, and I'd like to have some guidance or on how I can best accomplish that.
Friedel?
Yeah, welcome. That's cool. Very cool. Sorry, I have another note regarding what we just talked about. I can actually enable GitHub and Google login into Discourse right now.
Thanks, do that. Goldani, can you explain more a bit about like what you're interested in as JavaScript, Golang, multi-formats, libp2p?
Yes, I have more experience with JavaScript and Python as far as the implementations go for IPFS. So
David?
So welcome, awesome. Glad to have you around. We have a bunch of people coming and like experiencing IPFS, especially the JavaScript version for the first time. We actually now have in an issue like just notes from someone that spent 2 weeks digging through all the repos, like investigating, asking us questions, jumping into these meetings, and basically getting information that like you will probably need as you go through the IPFS mountain. In the beginning, it might be like seem overwhelming because there's a lot of modules and a lot of pieces that connect together. But like most of them have like very well clear defined interfaces. It just like takes a little like some days to know where everything is. What I would recommend is like for you to read those notes, to read the notes. I will point you to the issue, and then like to go through issues that have L pointed and difficulty easy or moderate, and try to solve them. Like if an issue in just IPFS land has an L pointed tag, it means that like someone can tackle that issue and not be blocked. They can go from the beginning to the end and like solve that problem, and they will not have to wait in any spec nor have to wait in something else to be fixed. Typically, those issues are also like very well described. Like they say what is the problem, what needs to be done. If it's not the case, always feel free to ask on that issue, saying what is the exact problem, I don't understand, and me or anyone in the team will like jump and like make sure you have all the information you need to get that issue done. And yeah, like, keep coming to these chats. We are also always available in IRC. GitHub is always like one really great medium to talk with us. And yeah, like keep us posted. Like we are happy to help you to contribute to ideas.
Great, thank you so much.
Going to post here the issue.
Sweet. Awesome. Hopefully that'll help. Thanks for joining us. Looking at the agenda, I believe those are all of the items that we had to cover this hour. Would someone like to volunteer to be the moderator next time? Bueller?
I would, but I'm likely not going to be here next Monday.
Anyone else? Friedel, thank you. That's great.
You're welcome. Yeah, you can now log in with GitHub. Sorry about that. We just didn't know that we could do it. You were asking for volunteers, I think, but I didn't hear what you were asking for.
Oh, I just nominated you as a volunteer for moderator.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you. And then Victor, you're note taker next week. Thank you. All right. Well, that was very democratic and awesome. Since there are no more items on this call, I am going to say that we're pretty much done with the all hands call. Lars?
What's next?
Yeah.
Good question. Matt?
I can answer that. So first of all, we can use this time if anyone has any sort of open community discussion you want to have. We can discuss that now. But once we're done with this call, which if we finish early, that's fine. We'll just start the next ones early. We're still not 100% sure how we'll do this in future weeks, but this week we'll set aside some time. We're just setting aside time for the sprint to communicate with each other. So since we have set this up where a person is, if they're on a sprint, they are primarily focusing on that sprint. That means you are not necessarily paying attention to the work that's going on in the other sprints in parallel. So this is a time where we can just like partially talk about how we're doing it, how we're coordinating the work and all of that, because we're still figuring that out, but also just so that everyone can be keeping on top of it and keeping track of what we're up to and issues we're running into, all of that. So that's the official schedule would be an hour for this all hands and then an hour for the cross sprint chatter. But I don't think it's not even quarter of. And also I don't think that cross sprint conversation is going to take an hour.
So should we just have it now, is what you're saying?
Well, I got one more thing that we could mention.
Cool.
This is Kamavis. So coming up first week of February is the DApp hackathon with Ethereum and IPFS in Seattle. So there's kind of two things going on there. It's one, getting Ethereum devs and IPFS devs together to work on points of integration between those two systems. And while we're at it, kind of kicking off a public hackathon, like do it yourself at home. So there's going to be a night of talks on Sunday, February 5th, and then maybe like a drop-in get help day somewhere in the middle, and then sort of announce things on Saturday or something. Meanwhile, the Ethereum, MetaMask, IPFS teams, whoever's able to make it, are working on the core integration stuff. There is a ticket, community issue 188. If anyone has any questions about that, now's a good time to ask. It's rapidly approaching. We have an Airbnb that's mostly full, but air beds are a thing. So yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for organizing all of that. I've been following the issue and trying to reply as soon as I can. I'll definitely be there. Are you I know that you pinged Juan and Jeremy while you're sleeping to give a talk. Are we looking for 20, 30-minute talks? Do you want workshops on the first day? Have we got a confirmation from Jeremy that he's going to be there?
No, not yet.
Yeah, we're pretty well represented on the Ethereum side for talks for Sunday, February 5th. But yeah, I mean, I can make up an IPFS talk, but I'm definitely not the best person for it.
Yeah, I'll just check in with Juan and Wire Slipping to see what their schedules look like.
Cool.
That's cool. Awesome.
I'm just calling out. Kumabis, were you watching on the stream or did you just join?
I just joined, yeah.
I recommend watching the recording from the earlier part of this because we've restructured our whole quarterly app, and it's information that will be useful for you.
Cool.
And on that roadmap, this Ethereum hackathon is already there on the roadmap on week 6 for those who are looking at the roadmap.
Awesome, thanks.
Frido?
There's the unmute button. Yeah, so I won't be able to come to the hackathon directly probably, but I will try to join remotely as we're all remote people. So I will try to shift my schedule a little bit closer to that of Seattle time zones, and try to be around and available and hack on things.
Cool, awesome. Do appreciate it.
Kumavis, do you want stickers? I can send you like 1,000 stickers.
Oh, hell yeah, that would be awesome.
I will send you 1,000 stickers. Cool. Okay. So I believe that's it.
Johnny Crunch and Frank, do you have anything that you wanted to discuss in open community context?
No, I think Richard and I might discuss something on the IPLD call, but I think I'll leave it for that call this Friday. I think I did just came across the Git book that actually for just getting up to speed with IPFS. One thing that I ran into was I submitted an issue about garbage collection. You know, maybe it's getting close to the time where actually garbage collection should be on by default in the daemon. I'll submit that as an issue.
I wish Jeremy was on the call because he's the one who's been thinking more about garbage collection lately.
Can you link it?
Oh, Kuba, you're here.
Yeah, I'm here for like half an hour or something. Just got from my labs. Maybe not half an hour, like 20 minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah, can you link me an issue? I'll take a look at that because like we are just borrowed in notifications and we hope nothing slips through, but I think some things might. Garbage collection currently is in a weird state. Like it's very expensive operation that we are not sure how to optimize. And it for sure can be optimized by optimizing data stores. I know that Kevina did a lot of work on optimizing data stores with garbage collection in mind. But we also have problems with data store size estimations and so on. And this, I think this is mainly the issue that stops garbage collection currently. So yeah, please link me an issue either in the Zoom chat or IRC. I will take a look at that. Thanks.
Okay.
Johnny Crunch, I am not sure whether the IPLD call will be happening on Friday. I don't know the current state of IPLD as an endeavor, and since we don't do the normal sprints involving like GoFest, IPFS, whatever, I'm not sure if IPLD will have its own sprint calls. Nicola is not on this call. Nicola is the main IPLD person. Might be a good idea to flag the issue here and just like mention that you want something to happen or you want to talk about something, and then we can either talk about it in the issue or have a separate IPLD call scheduled. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, mostly, as I mentioned, is about context. And in the JSON LD world, there's this concept of actually identifying your attributes for semantic interoperability. And I think, but I think it's JSON is JSON, so I think it's optional. But I think if that is actually something that in the IPLD world actually sort of wanted to have the context, the attributes described, and there's some nuances about how to actually implement that. I think. but I'm on the verifiable claims task force for W3C, and so I think we're talking about this quite a bit about leveraging IPFS, IPLD for some of those use cases.
Could you make an issue for that? So I know Ed Silverton who, has run into that same thing of so in the context of IIIF and using the JSON there, that there's this detail about how you handle attributes that is not easy to reconcile with IPLD. And I know he's been sort of frustrated with that also. And so but there's no issue that specifically calls that out. So it's been hard for me to get it on Nicola's radar of like, this is a thing that needs to be handled in order for IPLD to be easy for people to adopt.
Yeah, sure. I'll write it up and put it as an issue.
Thank you.
Awesome. With that, I propose that we have 5 more topics, which will now appear. No, okay, that's actually the end. Sweet. Thank you, everyone, for joining the IPFS All Hands Call. You're all wonderful people. Congratulations. I believe we will now segue immediately into the sprints call. Matt?
Yeah, David, can I go first, since I held off from the community portion of the relevant part of my sprint, since we're talking about it relative to the sprint.
Matt, before you begin, I just want to be very clear with everyone. The all hands call is over. If you want to go, you can go. Thank you.
The all hands call is over, but stick around for just a moment because I have this community relevant info that happens to fit underneath my sprint call, and I didn't want to repeat myself.
Okay, Matt, take it away.
I don't know that we need a note taker for these calls, since it's mostly information that's already recorded sort of redundantly in a bunch of issues. I think typing it up in a hackpad is just excessive effort. Richard?
Since this is the first of these calls, why don't we just throw it in the all hands notes?
Sure. Is someone willing to throw those notes into the bottom of the all hands? All right. Okay, Richard, thank you for note taking. And then we'll see if we actually need a note taker for these discussions. So the thing that's relevant to the community as a whole is, so I attended a hackathon at University of Pennsylvania this weekend that was organized by the Data Refuge and Climate Mirror projects. Those are both, they're both community-driven efforts that they arose from people who rely on climate data sets being worried that the data sets hosted by the US federal government will get turned off, or the servers will get turned off, and then their data won't be available anymore. And so even if we did not care about this data personally or politically, there is the interesting thing of, this is a very clear example of centralization hurting, right? Where you have an entire field of researchers spread across many different domains who are suddenly very worried that their data is going to disappear because one server might get turned off, or a couple of servers controlled by one organization might get turned off, and suddenly their entire field of research is in peril. And so this is where we have stood up and said, well, let's look at the fact that this is a symptom of the broader, deeper problem of centralization. And I published an article about that on Medium a couple weeks ago. And so at the hackathon, I got to talk to some people about what that looks like on the ground, of what it looks like to decentralize an entire field of research and data sets. And let me tell you, it's complicated, and it involves a whole lot of metadata. And so that's one thing that I wanted. It's sort of relevant as just general community discussion, we also are spinning up a sprint where we're collaborating with Stanford University's libraries and probably a number of other big libraries with lots of storage and archivists and preservation plans to look at what it would look like to download all of data.gov, which is about 300 or 350 terabytes of data, and preserve it on their regular preservation systems, but also publish it on IPFS so that it's, one, available for people to use, but also so that networks of people can coordinate to help hold and preserve these data in a distributed fashion. And so that's exciting in and of itself due to the nature of the content. It's also a great load test for our systems, that we currently have not been running any tests where we load 300 terabytes of data onto IPFS and move it across the network. And so now we get to test that, and we get to see how we can improve the user experience there, what performance issues can be tuned. This also brings up especially issues around file store, where file store is the label we use for this sort of index the content in place rather than putting a copy of it into the IPFS repo. So for example, if I have 300 terabytes of data and currently use IPFS add to add it to IPFS, suddenly I have 600 terabytes of data to store. File store would allow you to point IPFS at those 300 terabytes, and it would index it in place and serve the blocks directly from the files that are there on your file system. So that's obviously the bigger the data you have, the more important it is to have this feature. And so 300 terabytes definitely is over that threshold where it makes a big difference. And so so this is where we will be looking at, can we move file store forward, or at least get a very basic implementation of file store merged so that they could use it this week. But also we'll be looking at, this sort of triggered this topic of IPFS pack, which is basically a strategy for building manifests of your data, or manifests of the data that you've registered. And then there's all this performance stuff and user experience stuff around it. So that's what this sprint is focused on. It's come together very, very quickly. So I'm still honing in on the clear explanation of what we are doing in these 2 weeks and what we're trying to get done by the end of these 2 weeks. But that's the general sense. And as far as sprint coordination, we can look at the how. I was more interested in just telling people what's up, because it's exciting, interesting stuff. Do people want to ask questions about that, or David could tell about his sprint, and then we could go from there. David?
Oh, I see Johnny also has a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, I was just interested in whether or not genomic information from the NCBI is actually included in data.gov.
Mm. This is where you're asking, is it included, or you're calling out that it is included?
I'm asking if it is.
We would have to ask. So the way this came together is, I have for many years worked closely with the libraries at Stanford, and so they, on their own, said, we're just going to try this. We're going to try downloading all of data.gov, and then we're going to try putting it on IPFS and see what happens. So they emailed us and said, hey, they were basically like, heads up, we're going to be trying this. And we said, hey, we're going to put some real effort into helping you try this. And so I think from their side, this has happened so quickly that they haven't necessarily fully figured out what is there in data.gov. Like they've managed to figure out it's about 350 terabytes. That they would be pulling down, but I don't think they've gotten into the details of what, where, how, the contents. But a good point would be, if those data sets, the genomics data sets, are included, then this would be a good example of where a big institution like Stanford's libraries can hold the whole corpus, but then you might have all sorts of reasons to hold your own copy of the subset that is relevant to your field. And IPFS would give us really great ways for keeping track of how many redundant copies are there of this particular data set across the network, and things like that. So that sort of drifts into use cases for cluster, for IPFS cluster, and coordinating all that. It brought up a bunch of people in this area have asked over the last few weeks. They specifically requested or asked, is there a way to easily identify what are the most endangered blocks on the network? So within this data set, with this root hash, what are the blocks that have the least redundant copies on the network so that I could pick those up and hold them, right? Like where is my storage assistance most needed within this data set? Is a use case that people have, I think 5 different people have approached me about it over the past 2 weeks. So that's definitely like falls under the category of IPFS cluster in our thinking about planning. But it also is relevant to this sprint.
And I think also it's load testing, I think is important for me. So I run a cluster of about 20 machines right now. And so certainly that's how I found out was actually the garbage collection was actually not on by default. It was actually suddenly over a week and a half, it exploded. And so right now, actually I'm running, and it looks as though there's right now maybe a few thousand files, 2 gigabytes, I think, of memory right now. So in most of my machines. So I certainly would be interested in seeing what the load testing would be. So I'm trying to use this in production for genomic analysis pipelines, and I handle about 55,000 different genomes of species. So, and I haven't put all of those into IPFS yet because I'm worried it's going to hit my my production servers.
Cool. They're also related to that on our roadmap for week 9. Well, week 9 and week 10 is a sprint on the interplanetary test lab, and that's where we want to build out better testing infrastructure for doing this kind of load testing and all sorts of varieties of testing that you might want to do. So it'd be great to have you involved in planning for that, of how we can make that test lab most useful.
Yeah, definitely, and also I think in the JSON LD or context, I think it'd be important for that metadata to actually to have that interoperability. So it's not loading redundant data. And I think what I'm still struggling with is actually how to do that in the JSON in a deterministic way, because actually there's in JSON LD you can actually have an expanded form, the full RDA model, or a compact form, and those obviously would be different hashes.
So I think that's the main reason that why IPLD uses CBOR, and it could be use case for IPLD itself. I don't know, like I think that you mentioned that there are some problems with that, but David, go take it over.
There is 2 things. Like one of the reasons to have a compact version is to like save space. But like when you have a compact version, you're just saving space on the wire. You're not saving space on storage because you still need to keep the metadata. One of the things why you want a non-compacted or an expanded version is because you can expand the same data in several ways using different schemas or schemas that evolve over time. And the way that we propose that is instead of like forcing the data through this filter and it has to come out under this specific schema, you just like have metadata that points to the data itself, so that like you can describe some data with several pieces of metadata that you have available on the network, and those can like change over time. And you can even also use mutable pointers for those if you want to. It is not using one single processor, so like LD in a low level is just like a thing that you create the graph structure and then you serialize using the format that you picked or the format that you picked. But like in a higher level, you can do the same semantic web kind of stuff, but instead of like forcing that on the data structure, you build that on top. Hope this helped clarify. Thank you. But yeah, so I have one question. Should I go with my question now?
I was just going to call out there is also a sprint about IPLD starting in week 5, which is in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's true. Lars has a
Technical points. Lars?
I just call this call over and start the next one.
We are in the next one.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
On the Solidify IPLD, it will be a lot about getting the examples, getting people to understand what is the path resolver, and also to get the API to manipulate IPLD objects on IPFS really nice. It will still not be these semantic web properties that will be mounted on top of IPLD though. Just clarify. But then the sprint, and once we do the prep for the sprint, it will be more clear by the list of tasks that will arise from the preparation, I believe. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm like now interrupting, like.
Nope.
Johnny, did you have your answer, the question answered? Would you like to ask for some more clarification?
No, I think we just have to sort of flesh it out, and I should probably have some implementation guide for leveraging IPLD and and really work out an example of either it could be the expanded form or the compact form, but you know, because those obviously will change the hash of the pointer of the in resource that is described. And I think there's also some discussion about in W3C world, it really wants to be in a URI endpoint. And so obviously IPFS starts with, you know, /IPFS. And I know that going back about a year ago, there was actually discussions of a file colon or a UX colon // and so to describe that IPFS. But I think I certainly understand the rationale of actually having it as a file on this file service, IPFS. And so the challenge is actually for the JSON LD parsers to actually get caught up to speed and recognize that in resource may be on a file server like IPFS. So I think, so just mostly I think needs to be some dialogue with the W3C and for us, I'm on the verifiable claims task force, which is going to be a working group soon. And so how to actually make sure we have that. Because I think in JSON LD, it's still JSON, and the discussion right now is whether or not it should just remain JSON or it should be JSON LD. And in which case the context and even I think the type is actually part of the specification.
So a couple of thoughts on that. So on the JSON LD versus just JSON, one of the things that and the reason why IPLD is kind of like this multi-level IPLD, where you have like the base level, just data format that supports multiple serialization formats, CBORP or above, Ethereum blocks, Git objects, and so on. And like then you can link through all of them, and you can resolve paths through all of them using CIDs. The reason why we don't have any semantic web properties on that level is because when we looked at JSON LD and we really try to incorporate everything in one single package, what we learned is that like once you enter the semantic web at full throttle, you start like filtering out a lot of data. For example, in a JSON LD parser, as soon as you throw JSON that doesn't conform with the schema, the parser just drops it. And that's like by spec, right? So we cannot do that at the low level. We need to preserve data, and then we describe kind of like this parsing through this data of like using different contexts, more like a transformation. So you have a bunch of data, you have some context, and you apply that data through that context, and you are transforming this data in another view of that data, right? And this is an area where Nicola Greco is really working like pretty much 100% of his time. Like, what are the primitives to the developers, to data scientists that create these transformations, these views over data, and it can be plugged together. So in the end, you can even have a stream of data that can even come from a pub/sub stream, like coming from some sensor somewhere, and like it's generating IPLD objects, and like you are transforming and transforming and transforming. You have like, you can have a pipeline of transformations even between organizations, right? Like an organization treats the data somehow, and like another organization treats the data a little bit more. And like each organization knows its context, knows where the data is coming from, understands that, and just passes the data forward to another consumer. So in the IPLD nodes, you'll find more of these context things described as transformations. The other thing on the fs://, the reason behind that is so that like IPFS paths or just like content addressable paths are mountable, are like Unix friendly. We have the /IPFS/hash right now, but we are moving towards having /IPLD/hash to resolve on the gateway. But with CIDs, you're actually describing in the identifier of the content, not only the content hash, but also the multi-codec, so the format. You're lifting the extension up to the link itself. And you're also like describing the version of this identifier and the way that it is encoded. So like this identifier makes it really good to create paths that are Unix-like, that can be represented in a friendly way. For example, domains cannot have some characters, so you have like to encode it instead of like base 58, you have to encode it in base 32. So CIDs make it really nice for like if you want to have // something, and you no longer need to have the prefix of like /IPFS, because as soon as it's a CID, it's the CID of the content, which IPFS knows how to resolve. But you can even have like blocks in your system that you use just like, instead of like the full IPFS machine, you just use the reader from your system, and you can still understand what data you have in your machine without having the full node injected. And that's like why the fs://, because it makes it agnostic. It doesn't favor just like resolving to IPFS, and CIDs are like this key achievement where you lift the information about the content that you're resolving to the link itself, so that you no longer need /IPFS or /IPL. But yeah, I can go like way longer.
I love it. I think it's the right way to do it. I think one comment I had with my reservation was about limiting the CIDs, because I think it's the first byte or two. And so you're limiting let's say an address on an account on Ethereum platform. And so I think you're limited by the number of bytes to the number of different endpoints or domains or networks. And so I think
well, we are not limited because we use multi-codec, and multi-codec is a variant. So we have now, if you go to multi-format/multi-codec, you will find a table that's like already really long, and like people keep posting more codecs for their data formats. We have already a bunch of like Ethereum formats, Git, Zcash, and so on, and we just need to assign a number to its format. And it is like right now adoption has been pretty smooth. Like we also want to avoid having codecs that are like 10 bytes long, just because like it will save a lot of bandwidth. But the QE will be able to reference as many IPLD formats as we want. There will not be any limitation by design. Then like you might decide that your node doesn't know how to resolve Ethereum formats because you don't care about Ethereum formats. So like if you try to resolve in your node an Ethereum format, then it just throws you raw bytes. Like it doesn't know how to do anything else. And this is like, it's interesting because like if you are working in the browser, you might not want the full thing for everyone. If you are doing like IoT devices that are low memory, you don't also want to incorporate every single hash function in the world in every single format in the world.
Gotcha.
All the memory.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yep. Yeah. All right. Got my vote.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Do we have any next questions? I still have mine question. Matt, I know.
Seems like it's time for your question. You had a question about my sprint, or you want to talk about
your sprint? Yeah, I still haven't gone to mine. But so my question is simple. So there is a big effort in Data.gov, and like we know about all of these people that are using this ginormous dataset. I'm very interested to learn how they are using it. What is the software? What are the applications? And if those applications are open source, and if we, by inviting the IPFS community to like solve this issue of like moving large data sets on IPFS, we can also invite the community to participate on that research, because I'll be very interested to know what they are doing with that amount of data. What are their like research? What is their research?
All right, I can provide some context of what data.gov is, which I think partially answers your question. Because sort of the answer to your question is, in the long big picture, is that there are tons and tons of different people building tons and tons of different interfaces on top of these data, and most of it is built as web applications that then need to be hosted. And in the long run, that has to change. That has all sorts of problems with it. But ultimately, there was no motivation to build those applications differently because the data was hosted in centralized ways. But for some background of what is data.gov, data.gov is the product of a executive order from the Obama administration from very early in Obama's first term, where they produced an executive order that made it so that US federal agencies are obligated to make all of their data publicly available as public open access content. And they're obligated to do it in ways that are where the data are actually useful, right? So up until that point, it was very hard to acquire data at all from a lot of federal agencies. If you did get it, it was often in a PDF. So it's like as data was pretty much useless. And so this executive order was aimed at changing that. And data.gov was set up as a portal that was aggregating those data from many different federal agencies and presenting a consistent interface for figuring out what data are there, what formats is it available in, et cetera, et cetera. And so over the past 6 years or so, I don't remember when they first launched data.gov, but in the time since then, agencies have bit by bit released data to the point where the data that is currently being published by federal agencies and is visible through this portal is about 350 terabytes. But it's like it's genomics data, it's climate data, it's labor statistics, it's housing data, it's everything that any federal agency chose to make available through the portal. And so this is where the libraries at Stanford said, well, all these people are scrambling to back up all this climate data, but let's just change the way that we distribute public open access data sets in general. And so they're just going at the whole thing which is like a giant undertaking. And this is just like the first pass of like what's involved in just downloading all that stuff and redistributing it on the block level, like on the bit level, like how do we download all those bits and then redistribute them? And then over time, then there's the questions of how do you build tooling for interfaces onto the data? How do you build metadata about it? How do you keep track of those data as they change over time? Like that is a long-term project. This is just the first, like, let's just see what's involved in downloading it and moving it around.
Okay, interesting.
But to your point, there's the thing of like, for example, a lot of those climate data sets, the way that researchers actually interface with the data is by interfaces that are hosted by a federal agency that give you a map interface for like running queries, basically. But the interface for interacting with the data and getting the data you need is an actual running application that presents the visual interface of a map. And so like there's that whole question of if you just back up the data sets that interface is querying, but you don't back up the code that's querying it, are people actually going to be able to use the data? So that's just one example of the problems that you're pointing at that people are going to have to tackle over time.
See, okay, that definitely answered my question. Still very interested in understanding what are those apps and what people are looking forward to do with all of that data. It seems to me that like one of the things that they will gain is that it will make it faster for them to use and to move it around. And then there will be like it will be very interesting once the open source community like gets hands on that data very easily, and I can pull parts of it and just like execute operations over it through IPFS, and seeing all sorts of visualizations, analysis, all sorts of statistics that will come from the data, and other pieces that will come from other places. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, that was my question. All right, should I go into describing what is the sprint that I'm captaining for these 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so the sprint I'm having for these 2 weeks, and I'm joined by Victor, Samuli, and Lars, and anyone in the community that wants to join, of course, is browser accesses Go IPFS content. And by that we mean like really being able to make the experience of a developer that arrives at the JS IPFS project, spawning a node in the browser and carrying a file that they added with Go IPFS. Right now, there's like some like small things that you have to understand, like the fact that like the browser cannot dial directly to IPFS. Like it is, you have to tell IPFS to listen on WebSockets, and then you have to tell the browser to dial on WebSockets. It is a manual process. And then during the process, you also have to understand that there is this peer-to-peer thing that supports all of the transports, and then there's multi-other thing. Like it's confusing. People are expecting to spawn a node and see peers as they see when they spawn a daemon in their CLI with Go IPFS. And that's what we are solving. We are creating bootstrapper nodes for JS IPFS nodes, so that when people spawn an IPFS node, they will have peers automatically. We are finishing up and implementing relay in JavaScript so that we can relay connections from all bootstrapper nodes to local nodes in our machines. And we are also fixing one issue with our stream multiplexer implementation. Actually, we are fixing the issue by implementing a new stream multiplexer, and the issue is actually found on the Go IPFS speedy stream multiplexer. And we are implementing a whole new stream multiplexer to solve that issue. The rabbit hole is deep in this one. But yeah, like this will enable Go IPFS and JS IPFS to exchange large files. Right now, there is a cap of 64K for a file between JS IPFS and Go IPFS. A cap that doesn't exist between Go IPFS and Go IPFS, neither JS IPFS to JS IPFS. You can today dial from your JS IPFS node in your desktop to the browser and exchange the size of the file you want and to the file. What we expect to have by the end of the sprint is like very powerful demos that people can like just run through them as tutorials, and that they can spawn their IPFS nodes, get peers connected, cat the files from cat the files that they added with Go IPFS, and do not feel any pain during that process, so that more people feel incentivized and encouraged to try out JS IPFS. There's a big list of tasks that is available on the IPFS/PM. And I believe this is it. Lars has his hand up. You want to say something, Lars?
Oh yeah, we're not just implementing Relay in JavaScript, but also in Go. Like there has been some very old code for Relay in Go, but it's never actually been used or tested. So.
Okay. So I guess that is part of one of the tasks is like understand what's going on with Go and like know if we need to re-implement it or not. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, Lars, your hand again. Okay.
Richard had his hand up, or were you just stretching? Oh, okay.
I was stretching.
We'll be checking. So I talked about this on the call before. We'll be checking daily on the sprint issue that's available on IPFS PM for this sprint. All the tasks are listed there. A bunch of stuff is happening. If you want to help out, join the endeavor, let me know. We'll be very focused hands down solving the problems for this issue, which means that like if there is another bug or other thing that we should like that comes up during this time, we might not have the availability to shift context to fix something else.
Davida, oh, go on, Richard.
What's the issue for that?
You want the number?
I'm looking. It's in the roadmap.
What I do is like I just search for browser.
310 IPFS PM 310.
310, yeah, exactly. Just got it as well. Thank you.
So, David, I've for my sprint, I'm sort of still tinkering on what's the like the right balance of how to formalize the user stories in a way that they're tracked, especially in the sense that like we might not get to all of them, so that like we want those user stories to be something that someone else could like pick up later, or that we could pick up on a future sprint. I think for this sprint, my inclination would just be sort of keep an eye on how you're doing it and keep an eye on how I'm doing it. And then we can check in after this 2 weeks and see like, and sort of trade notes and figure out, because we have so much to get done in the next 2 weeks. I don't want to derail with like process stuff. Does that make sense to you?
Sounds good. We will I'll probably run another prep session for next sprint next week, maybe Thursday morning or something. So maybe if we can like sync up like Wednesday afternoon and like compare our notes from what went well, what could have been better. Then when I get to prepare the next sprint, I will incorporate all of the warnings that you transferred to me into that preparation.
Cool. So that would be next Wednesday, not the day after
Wednesday,
tomorrow.
not this week, the week after. Right?
When you're preparing for the next sprint. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So yeah.
All right. If people do want to follow in with the data.gov thing, we'll be doing the sort of sprint planning session tomorrow, probably at the time that the Monday all hands usually starts. So 1700, 5 p.m. UTC. But that partially depends on when Jeremy's free. He's on a plane right now. So that time might change a bit, but it'll be roughly then tomorrow. We'll do a deeper sprint planning, look through the plan for the data.gov effort and and what we're going to try to achieve. All right, cool. Wow, less than an hour and a half total for our whole Monday sprint cycle. That's pretty amazing.
It's true.
Does anyone feel that they're being neglected right now by these calls being half as long? Richard, you feel neglected? In what way?
I wanted to raise my hand and talk about something.
All right. Oh, you just want. All right. Now you've done. Okay.
I feel like I can still like crunch some hours of work.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Cool. I will take these notes and put them into an issue or a markdown file in meeting notes. And Matt, let us know when you know about the time tomorrow in the sprint issue.
I will keep the sprint issue up to date so that it has a time listed right now. And unless I change that and add a note in the comments, then that's the time when the call is going to happen.
Cool. David, thank you for all the IPFS PM random issues you like closed / commented / assigned to me. That's what I'll be doing this week, I guess, is like going through that backlog.
Well, so glad you brought it up, because one thing that keeps crossing my mind is like I do this kind of like every other week or once a month. I just go through all the issues like that till I get tired, and I try to make sure like all of them get a little bit of attention and like I understand what is the state. And what I feel is that like we have a bunch of stuff that probably is already resolved. And what that creates is like the same syndrome where you have like an inbox full of emails that probably half of them are already like taken care of. And because you are not like deferring to a point in the future or not just archiving them, like each time you open the repo and see, oh my God, like 200 issues, closing this one, not going to like see any of them, right? It is a huge cognitive load. So I call it like doing GitHub hygiene, just like going through all of them, coalescing issues, trying to understand what can be closed, what has an action item that we can quickly close it, and so on. And well, I think it's like very helpful, at least for me, because it helps me get back on like checking what's going on in all the repos. I welcome everyone to try it out once, or maybe more than once. Yeah, maybe we can make this a team thing, like once a month. We just go through all the issues and like we just run through all of them, just make sure everyone is getting a little bit of attention. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. All right. Be gone. Take
right.
me away.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Oh.
Bye.
I started waving to you.
Bye.
Wait.
Mm-hmm.